Congresswoman, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
You are the chairwoman of one of the most important committees in all of Congress, a feat for anyone. But for you, as a refugee of this country, what does that mean? Do you ever think about that?
You know, it's pretty incredible, and it says a lot not about Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. It says a lot about the United States of America, that a refugee child could have come here at the age of 8, not knowing a word of English, and rise to become not only a member of Congress, but the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. You know, in few countries would they let a naturalized citizen chair such an important committee like this. So it's very awesome. And like I say, it's kudos to this great country for the opportunities that it affords every person, because no matter where you're from, no matter what your background is, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, every person can achieve his or her dreams, because this is the land of opportunity. It really is. And I know I would have never guessed when I came over at 8 that I would be here. Of course, who would think such things when you're 8 years old?
Yeah, well, that's great. I was hoping we could talk about the country you left behind, Cuba. As you know, Cuba is facing a series of endemic problems, ranging from its dictatorial leadership, economic stagnation. I guess the question I wanted to ask you is, where do you see U.S.-Cuban relations in the short term and in the long term?
Well, I hope that the U.S. policy is always to help the Cuban people free themselves. We're not advocating that the Marines rush the beaches of Cuba.
Sure.
That's something that the Cuban people have to decide for themselves, and it's their island, it's their future. But I hope that the goal is always to free people from their oppressors. That should be the policy and our goal in our foreign policy. That should be what drives our U.S. role in the world. That is to foster democratic change, to foster respect for human rights, free elections, independently and supervised elections, and free political parties, free unions to be allowed to thrive,
right.
Free media. You know, here we take it for granted. I'm sitting here. I don't know what you're going to ask me. You have the freedom to ask me anything. I have the freedom to not answer. And but in Cuba, this interview could not take place because you would not have the license to do it, and I would not be free to give the interview.
Right, right. So we could talk a little bit now, a little further south, going now to Venezuela. As you know, the situation there is also in flux, and a vacuum of leadership. You know, with the question of Hugo Chavez's sickness. I guess, you know, similar to what is the U.S.'s position on that? What should be kind of our underlying kind of way of looking at that country?
Well, Hugo Chavez always incorrectly says that the United States is this Yankee aggressor, and they want a colonial Venezuela. They want we want to stretch our limits to rule Venezuela. And anyone who's listening to this, who's from the United States and knows our country, knows that this is laughable, because we don't have any such ambition. And even in Iraq, we've had blood and treasure over there, and it's been very painful for our country. But we're leaving Iraq, and we're going to leave Afghanistan, and no one is a conquering empire anymore. So in Venezuela, it's following, sadly, Hugo Chavez is following the sad example of the Castro brothers, restricting human rights, restricting free access to media, restricting everything. And what people want are freedom, respect for human rights, liberty, freedom of expression, the right of assembly. You know, in Hugo Chavez's Venezuela, if you're a judge and you make a decision that goes against his regime, he takes that judge out of there, he puts someone else there. So it's a tyrannical regime, and he used the democratic means to get to power, but then does not rule in a democratic manner. So that is not a democracy.
Yeah. With the economy, the unemployment rate as high as it is, other issues many times eclipsing what's happening in Latin America, why should we, as Americans, be concerned about the attack of democracy and human rights in the Western Hemisphere?
I know that we're so concerned about our economy, and rightfully so. $14.3 trillion debt, an unemployment rate that keeps rising instead of it gets lower. It's a problem, a deficit that's out of control. Every child born already owes Uncle Sam almost $46,000. More than 40 cents out of every dollar that we spend is borrowed. So it's a crisis. But that should not overshadow the important concerns that we have for freedom, democracy, and human rights overseas. Why? Because in the end, it's a good investment for the United States to be involved in other countries and trying to help people get democratic governance, not to take over their country, but to help people be free. And that is an investment that will pay off in the future, because then we won't have to go to war like we did in Iraq and in Afghanistan and other places, because free people with democracy do not fight wars against each other, because they understand that that's a foolish game that will end up with them being the loser for it. So in this age of nuclear weapons, where so many countries now have them, we've got to think long and hard about how to make our money count, and we should prevent evil dictatorships like Iran from having nuclear weapons, and we should help oppressed people like the people in Cuba and Venezuela free themselves and have freedom of expression. And that's what built this country, is opportunity and freedom and achieving one's dreams. And in the end, it's a small investment that will be paying off in spades for the United States, to have friendly neighbors.
Well, thank you. You're an inspiration to a lot of us, including
That
myself.
means I'm really old, right?
No, that's not true. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Love heritage.